The In Conversation with Trevor Ideas Festival Luncheon brought together movers and shakers of our society that believe in being the change they want to see. Our special guests who graced us with their presence were the Princess of Africa, Mama Yvonne Chaka Chaka, a tech investor and former CEO of Google South Africa, Stafford Massey, and a product of Zimbabwe, the founder of Kumusha Wines, Tinashe Nyamudoka. Our next speaker is a phenomenal man. He was born in Harare, and he worked his way up to the position of a manager at a grocery store when Zimbabwe fell into an economic crisis. The wine on the tables is sponsored by his company. After moving to Cape Town in South Africa, he found work polishing cutlery at the esteemed fine dining restaurant, The Roundhouse. After being promoted to waiter and without any prior experience of wine, he learned from the beverage director. I'll let him finish his story. Ladies and gentlemen, please put a round of applause for Tinashe Nyamudoka from the Kumusha Wine Story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the great introductions. And it's a pleasure and honor being in front of all of you esteemed guests. And I'll have to say thank you to, most importantly, Trevor, for giving me this opportunity. And, you know, you've pretty much did the introduction about how I started. Maybe I'll just plug in a little bit that's been left. I can stand here the whole day talking about the stories, so believe me if I'm gonna be a bit rushed in a way. So I was born in Harare for sure, and I did my schooling in Avondale and finished my secondary level 2002, a few weeks before my dad passed away. And I finished my high school at Sandringham in Norton in 2004. And as I recall vividly, after finishing A-level, it doesn't sound weird now, but then it was weird because my mom was against it. I didn't want to go to university. For me, it wasn't an aspiration. I just wanted to work, and I found work in a supermarket, TM Marondera, packing shelves. And because I had good grades in my O-level, and A-levels as well, the manager said, you're wasting a bit of a talent. That's why they put me in a fast-track junior management program that they used to run, Mikkels. So by the time I joined 2005, by 2008, I was a junior manager at TM Marondera. And yeah, I saw firsthand how the economy tanked. And, you know, working in a supermarket and you actually see there's not even a bar of soap on the shelves. For me was the decision to go down south and greener pastures, as they said. So I left January 2008, and by inclination, the first place I started to look for work was in the retail supermarkets. And it was just, disheartening that before I even went to apply, I was talking to my colleagues who I was staying with, and we were sharing a room of one room with 4 other colleagues. My friend had been in Cape Town, so he humbly, found me waiting at the train station. And, I've heard stories of people who were ghosted. They knew someone who was in Cape Town, they arrived there, they didn't show up and spend a lot of days on the streets. So when we were living together, I told them I'm gonna apply for a manager position at a local spa, and they were the first ones to laugh at me because they say there's no black manager managing in a retail store. So for me, it was a shock because I'd been in Zimbabwe. Of course, things were tough and worse, but I could easily hold that position. So I went with my CV and a bunch of certificates, and the spa manager actually agreed that I was qualified, but he said the only position available is baking bread. And I had known baking bread, managing a small bakery at the supermarket. So in no time, I was baking hot cross buns. I remember it was Easter time. And I worked there for about 3 months. And it's one of those humbling experiences that, you take what life gives you, you embrace it. you enjoy doing it, and it becomes simple and easy, right? But while I was working there, my friend was working in restaurants, and he would come home counting his tip money and his wages, and I realized his day's earnings were almost equal to my weekly wage. So it was a no-brainer. I was in the wrong place. So I needed to work in restaurants to make money. But I'd never worked in a restaurant before. I didn't even recall by that stage visiting restaurants, fine dining restaurants in Zimbabwe. All I knew was Chicken Inn. And so I had to tailor make a CV, which didn't really go into places because I was lying that I worked in a restaurant, and I would walk up into a restaurant, they asked me about wine, and I would become numb. So eventually I was lucky there was a restaurant, the Roundhouse restaurant she mentioned, they were just opening up, and they were actually looking for people without prior knowledge, but just eagerness to learn, and that's how I got to work in a restaurant. And when I was there, being as agile as I am and looking for opportunities, I quickly realized if you knew a lot about wine, you could upsell on a table. The more you sell in a restaurant, the more money you make. So for me, learning about wine was just pretty much to make a lot of money. But I was just fortunate that the restaurant owners, their fathers' parents, owned top vineyards, Ditoren, Waterford. So we would go and do wine tastings, and I acquired the taste of wine. And I had people asking me for sweet wine. Most of us started from sweet, but the good wine, everything in life that is pretty is acquired. So it never tastes great in the beginning, but you have to taste more of it and acquire. So that's what happened to me, and I found myself now going into supermarkets within my budgets, spending on wine and introducing wine. And because I was so good at selling wine, one of the managers said, you know what, there's this profession called a sommelier, I think you might do it. And by that time, because the peer pressure was coming to me, the guys I went to high school with were graduating, having their degrees, and I was here without a degree. So I started doing online university, BCom Accounting Science with UNISA. And he said, maybe you might try to the wine. So I enrolled in wine, doing Cape Wine Academy. I was doing both concurrently. 4 years in, I joined the one and only hotel in Cape Town. And that's where really the wine world opened up for me. It was top resort, 6,000 bottle seller. There was a top sommelier who was brought in all the way from Dubai. And for me, I saw a career progression, and I was doing something that I really loved doing. And being a restaurant and storytelling, and you don't know how much money we made on the Mugabe story. You just mentioned Robert Mugabe in a restaurant in Cape Town. You're getting much more tips, right? It doesn't matter if you liked him or not. So those storytellings, I think, almost primed me towards what I am now, because you have to be agile. You meet different people, you sell, you upsell, you understand taste, you understand food. And working in restaurants really helped me hone that soft skill. So I worked for the one and only, I worked for the Oyster Box in Durban. Then I joined the Test Kitchen restaurant in 2015 as the head sommelier and beverage manager. And the Test Kitchen at that time was the best restaurant in South Africa for 6 years in a running. And they were number 28 in the world, on the world's 50 best. And I joined them in 2015. In my first year, I'd won the Best Wine Service Award. The restaurant had never won it. We climbed to number 22 in the world. And I remember a conversation with my I still call him boss, who was the owner chef. And he said, you've been here for only a year, and already you've achieved this. My main worry is, how do I keep you here? And most importantly, how do I keep you happy? So I just rewind a year before when I was in Durban. So Durban is like a sleepy town for wine, I had so much time. I would work in the afternoon, go by the beach, sit, and really think what I wanted to do. And I think most of us who went to South Africa in 2008 were saying, we're going to go to South Africa, we'll make a little bit of money, watch the World Cup, and by that time, Zimbabwe will be great and we'll come back, right? Then you realize, okay, World Cup is gone, 2011, 2012, 2013, you're still stuck in South Africa, and you can't be saving. I think most of the mindset of people I know who've made it in South Africa changed their mindset that, okay, we better start making a life here. And most of my friends had started companies, and it was to do with what they weren't doing in Zimbabwe but learned in South Africa, then went on to make businesses. And I was like, I'm in wine. Surely my business has to be around wine. But by that time, I wasn't knowledgeable enough. I didn't know. I would write down. But I had one idea because of the events in 2014, the xenophobic attacks in Durban, which were very tough. I remember not going to work for a week at the Oyster Box. But watching the news, there will always be one number which came out. There's 3 million Zimbabwe. I don't know how many now. They would say 3 million in Zimbabweans in South Africa taking jobs and all that stuff. And for me, I was like, if there's 3 million in Zimbabweans in South Africa, I just only need 1,000 to sell wine to, or to sell to a brand. So that was my idea. And it just stuck with me. I would pass it around to my colleagues in wine, but no one really pitched up to it. And come 2016, when I'm having this conversation with my boss, and I said, you know what one thing you can do is there's a new course that UCT is running, Graduate School of Business. It's called a Postgraduate Diploma in Wine Business Management. And I would love to enroll in that if you can pay for me. So he did pay for me. I attended that course, and I remember the first assignment they gave us was, you've got a Portuguese community in South Africa, and you have to come up with a wine brand. So for me, it was an aha experience that, okay, I wasn't really crazy. You can create a wine brand for a specific target. So that became the essence of everything tying together. But obviously, you needed a name, and I needed a name that resonated with Zimbabweans. And for me, I'm not sure how many of you have stayed abroad. If you meet someone, you establish that he's Zimbabwean, the first question you ask is Kumusha right? Then all conversation starts and all memories. You might even be told the bus that goes to the rural village, right? So I felt it's a name that would resonate and that would evoke memories to people staying there. And obviously I didn't come from a winemaking background, but from the business school, I knew where wine is produced, how you move it, where you sell it, how you package it. And I went in partnership with a wine farm called Opstal. It's in Rossonville in Cape Town. So we started the partnership where I would already sample wines they'd made in their cellar, make my own blends. And I made my first bottling in 2017, which was the Flame Lily you're tasting on the table. 2021 is my 5th vintage. So the first one was a 2016. I called it a white blend. I had 1,200 bottles. And my boss had said, if you're gonna make wine, it better work in the restaurant because I know you're gonna struggle selling it, but we'll just use it here. And it's clearly what happened. And so I sold most of it in the restaurant, but there was a good demand and a good reception of the brand, especially local. Then it made me want to produce more, which I did. Not so well thought after and a tough mistake, which paid off later. So I overproduced, and coming into 2020, sitting on almost 3,000 bottles on a store stock. And clearly for me, the business wasn't working well, and I thought I'd got an American visa. I was supposed to go to America March of 2020. I resigned beginning of February from my job, and we all know what happened. COVID happened, and I'm stuck with these bottles, which I felt I was struggling to sell. And thankfully or not thankfully to Uncle Cyril for closing, but for me, that liquid turned into gold. And yeah, if you knew your way around the city, you could make a killing, right? And yeah. So it almost gave me life to the brand, and I did a rebranding. If guys have followed the Kumusha story, you realize I've got an old, beautiful brand, which I felt was just a village home with huts, with mombe, netuhuku, and kids playing around. But I felt I wasn't getting into markets like Europe because it didn't resonate with them. So I sat with a European to help me, get in the middle in terms of the branding. So you've got the wines on your table. So we kind of sat and discussed the way I wanted it to feel in an African way, and he gave me a European perspective, and we came together with this beautiful label which incorporates the Flame Lily, the Zimbabwe national flower, which I named after my premium white blend on the table. You've got the Protea flower on top, and that's me in the center. When we're shooting the documentary Blind Ambition, I'm not sure how many of you have watched it, another story for another day. And it incorporates roots, the great Zimbabwe ruins around it. And I can safely say now I'm into huge markets. So I sell in America. That's my... So from 1,200 bottles 5 years ago, in the last 2 years, I've seen phenomenal growth. This past year alone, we've surpassed 250,000 bottles. And like I say, majority is sold in the USA, in 33 states. I sell in the UK, I sell in Holland, and now of late I've banked on Norway and Bulgaria. In Africa, I sell in Zimbabwe, I actually export. So that's probably that was one of my exciting, because when I left the country, I only had a backpack and 2 change of clothes. Now I bring truckloads of wine. And so Zimbabwe, and believe it or not, I sell more wines in Kenya than in Zimbabwe. And some goes to Ghana as well as Rwanda. And I would love going forward to be selling majority in Africa. And I spent 7 weeks in the United States touring 13 different states, 30 plus cities. And what was really touching for me was I always thought, of course, the brand and the wines are grown in South Africa, and I don't make, it's not a hidden truth. I actually like to say, the wines are made from South Africa. But what's been captivating is them being made by a Zimbabwean, and that being embraced. And for me, keeping that authenticity and not losing my identity and loving to be Zimbabwean. And I even put it at the back of my bottle, And so I feel, as much as we at this crossroads in the country, but the Zimbabweanness in us sells. The Zimbabwean brand is stronger than we think on a global level. And for me, having birthed an idea which is Zimbabwean to roots, it's got African wineness into it, and being able to sell it globally, and not just sell, but sell phenomenally well, gives me hope that we can achieve anything with any product that's coming from Africa, anywhere in Africa, and most importantly, Zimbabwe. So if you haven't tasted the wine, please take a chance to taste them. I've just selected 4, which I feel have a different story about them. Like I said, the Flame Lily is my premium white, which is the first vintage. I have a vintage of Kumusha. I call it the Hurudza. So Hurudza, as we know, is a master farmer. I dedicated to my late grandfather, who passed away last year, before the wine went on the market. So I dedicate that wine to him, because he was a very skillful and master farmer, and probably I'm here today because of his schooling that he did to my parents. So I hope you enjoy the wines and spread the Kumusha word. I always say, your word of mouth is my oxygen.
This luncheon was a gathering for the In Conversation with Trevor alumni to share their vast wisdom and network with startups and entrepreneurs. Mark Twain once said, "The secret of getting started is getting started." We took this gathering as an opportunity to officially launch the Ideas Festival. It will be a non-political and non-partisan gathering to feast on fresh ideas for shaping our collective destiny. Issues to be discussed include technology, the new workplace, business, climate change, entrepreneurship, women and youth in business, music, arts and culture will also be on the agenda, including discussions on norms and values that undergird the progressive society. The Ideas Festival, creating a marketplace of ideas. Join us in September for the Ideas Festival.